So I'm joined today by Jay Palter of Social Advisory. Jay is going to talk to us a little bit about what it is he does, what he's been up to recently. So I wanted to kick off just by kind of letting Jay, in his own words, introduce himself. Obviously, welcome, and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so Jay Palter, we do influencer marketing and outreach. I would say more influencer outreach and engagement, specifically in a B2B setting. So we're really focused on trying to help business leaders identify and engage with key influencers in the subject areas that they're doing business.
Okay, how did you sort of hone in on the B2B part of that specifically?
You know, I really have always been in a B2B marketing and sales environment, and sort of found myself in fintech and tech in general. And I think there's a missing opportunity here where business leaders don't really know how to use their social networks strategically to build valuable business relationships. And so, while many organizations focus on the brand influencer marketing, I kind of focus on helping a leader in the company step forward and become an ambassador, if you will, to other individual influencers. Because influencers are really social people that want to engage in a social connection. And so I help people do that more through individuals in their organization.
No, that makes sense. I think we're seeing something quite similar. We're sort of seeing all the same trends. It's interesting you sort of mentioned that often it's about trying to just get the leaders out there. What do you find is most often the missing link? Is it the social element, or do you find some leaders are just they're so focused on leading their business unit that they sort of haven't had time to do the networking stuff that maybe got them to where they are, but they sort of fall out of it?
Right. There's a lot of factors. I think a lot of business. I mean, people are busy. There's no question about that. But I don't think a lot of business leaders today, even younger, digitally savvy business leaders, understand a social network today is not just a channel to sort of pump your marketing through. It's not pipe that you just push out messaging. It's an extension of networking, right? And most business people would say that their social network, the people they can call on, who know them, are actually the most valuable business asset they have. And I think a lot of leaders don't realize that LinkedIn or Twitter can be a very powerful social network, an extension of your personal social network. And that's the goal. I think the relationships that you can build are actually the return on investment. Oftentimes we're looking for marketing metrics and social media metrics as return. Like, what am I getting? Well, if you approach a relationship more, equally, I mean, it's a two-way street. You have to give something of value, and that means time and energy and content. And what you get back is relationships, and the relationships can be very valuable to you in all kinds of ways, not just sales, not just they're social capital, and the social capital you get from relationships can be used in your business in a very strategic way.
Yeah, for sure. I think that can be quite a tricky thing maybe for marketers who are trying to build out the case for that to navigate. Do you ever find there's a sort of tension between the idea of, oh well, I'm going to build up this individual, what do we the brand get? What if we invest in Kevin does a great job, and then he takes that up the road?
Yeah.
How do you kind of deal with that?
Well, 100% there's a tension between, how a marketer looks at using social networks and then the assets they have, the individual personalities they have in the organization. There's 100% there's a tension. And, but nevertheless, I don't think marketers own sort of the only right approach to the world, right? I mean, I would argue influencer engagement is more of a public relations activity, and that it's about building brand in a longer term sense, and relationships are longer term investments. So you can't just approach it as a marketer. And I think if influencer engagement is solely located in the marketing part of your organization, you're going to, by necessity, the marketer thinks differently about these things than a public relations person would. And so, but to your point, there's obviously a tension between a personal brand of a leader and the corporate brand. And I think my answer to that is not any fancy, great solution, except to say that's a tension in the modern world that we have to figure out. And I think if you're a sophisticated organization, you have to figure out how to leverage your personal brands that are in your organization while at the same time promoting your corporate brand. And I just think there's a subtlety and a nuance there that a lot of marketers haven't grasped yet.
Yeah, I think that there's kind of two interesting parts to that. Isn't there? There's that saying you sometimes see doing the rounds of the conversation between the CFO and the CEO of like, what if we invest in our people and they leave? Is what the CFO says, and the CEO says, well, what if we don't and they stay?
Right.
You're kind of left with people who aren't really leveraging their networks properly. I thought it's interesting you kind of mentioned the distinction between maybe a PR person's skill set and maybe sort of how a marketer thinks about that. Like, can you elaborate on that a bit? What do you think are the sort of differences in outlook and skill set especially? Because I think to me anyway, like influencer marketing sort of it's fallen in between a lot. We see it kind of going down the cracks between. It's interesting. Do you think we'll see the creation of a new role really within organizations, or do you think everyone's just going to have to talk to each other more?
I think in many ways, we call it influencer marketing, which I think is a biased concept, which is why I like to say it's influencer outreach and engagement. We really want to have relationships between our organization and influencers. Now, the influencers in most cases are themselves individuals, right? I mean, there are corporate organizations that have lots of reach, but you have a different kind of relationship between a corporate brand. Even your business brand has a different relationship with its followers than a person, than a CEO or a CMO or some visible leader in your organization who's out there engaging, has a more personal relationship.
There's a difference between Mark Benioff and Salesforce.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's actually that's an important asset to try and leverage. And I mean, we're talking about the fact that it's difficult, it's challenging, there's conflict, 100%, but it is such a valuable thing when you can unleash that kind of power of a personal brand. And you can make that argument about training anybody anytime, right?
Yeah.
You've made the argument. So I mean, I guess at some point it's about an enlightened organization that realizes if they feed they feed the personal brands and the professional development of their organization, of their leaders, they will retain those people over a longer period of time. They will attract others who see that this is an organization that wants to, it wants to attract these kinds of people, right? I mean, you already start to see in certain businesses, there are some businesses that are actively recruiting people who have built their own audience, built their own online audience. I know Amanda, I work in wealth management. If you go to the United States, Barry Ritholtz is a big, investment guy, wealth management guy. He's recruited an entire firm of people who have built an online audience of their own, and they've built a wealth management firm out of nothing in 4 or 5 years that is substantial, is real, and it's based on people who have developed audience over the past decade through social networks, through Twitter, and are respected subject matter experts and influencers in their space, and they attract business to the firm. So I think a lot of businesses we're going to start seeing, they go looking for people who are influential in their space, have already built their audience, and they want those people working on behalf of their brand, rather than what I consider kind of a backward sense, which is we don't want to let our people out because we're afraid they're going to run away. We're afraid if they're enlightened and they see this opportunity, they're going to flee. Well, if that's all you got, then you're in trouble in the long run anyways.
Yeah, you should be. It's probably a bit more healthy to be thinking of the opportunities that are available rather than kind of fearing the consequences. What happens if all these people stay and you never let them out. Do you think we're going to start seeing, particularly in sort of customer-facing leadership roles, that sort of social advocacy start to become more of a requirement for leaders? Do you think are we there yet?
Well, I've been in this business for quite a few years, and I probably thought every year over the past 10 years that we were there, and we're still not there.
Yeah.
I think there's certain businesses where it makes more sense to do it, and there's certain personality types in roles where it makes a lot of sense, where the people themselves are just like that. I've found that there's a personality profile of a leader who wants to go out there and engage. I go to these events, social media, not even social media, fintech events, tech events, and I meet people who have self-selected to step forward and engage with people, and it's clearly not everybody, right? So certain people they're socially curious. They're they really thrive on social interaction. They want to build relationships. That's the way they interact with the world. That's the way they see the world, and so I don't think it's a universal thing, although it's clear that increasingly the role of a business leader is a role that includes communications element, right? And social media is is the ultimate platform these days for communications, whether it's corporate, personal, the mix, right? Sort of a personal brand, corporate brand. And so I think over time, we're going to see more people having to use that kind of platform to express their leadership.
Yeah, so I alluded there to Mark Benioff specifically as an example of someone who I think does a great job of sort of advocating for his brands. You know, is that the part of kind of running your business that really excites you, helping to sort of unlock leaders like that and helping them? Do you have like any examples of people who you kind of look at, who you think are doing a great job or who you've helped that you're really proud of?
Yeah, you know, if I'm working with somebody, I typically, a lot of people don't necessarily want to know they're getting help. So I don't like to talk about people who I am helping that way in a public sense. But I think what is, my ideal situation is that somebody does step forward and say, I see an opportunity to be a more effective leader, a better leader. And again, I don't want to stress it. Don't just be the leader at the very top of an organization. There are lots of leaders in organizations.
Yeah.
And what I have found, in fact, is that the pinnacle, the CEO leaders or the C-level leaders are often not the ones who, for all kinds of reasons, want to step forward. But there's other leaders in organizations at various levels where they in fact interact more in the world. Like that's their lives are interacting with the world more, and they have stepped forward and they have built these these networks. What I would say is that organizations today are far more porous than they ever have been. Social networks are opening us up to the fact that the organization we have today, any organization, Onalytic is a perfect example, there's lots of people that you have as full-time employees that have skill sets, but there's skills that you need that are not necessarily in the people that you have full-time today. And I think organizations increasingly are looking at the world and saying, we need skills. We don't necessarily need everybody to be a full-time employee of our organization. So we need to figure out how to leverage the skills we need to succeed. And social networks are actually the path to that. That's, the organization is far less insular than it ever was. And I think organizations that see the opportunity that we can leverage influencer networks. We can get, and it's not just getting your message out, it's you get all kinds of intelligence that come through these networks. So if you tie into them, you often set out to do that in order to push something out. We want to get our message out. But the reality is, if you're actually doing it right, you're getting insight about how's your message being received. What are people talking about? What are key issues? How do you frame your message to be part of a discussion that's already happening out there, rather than trying to get people to stop that discussion and look at your information, right? That whole interruption marketing is becoming less effective, advertising in general, and becoming part of a conversation that's already happening, even framing your positions so that they fit into a conversation that people are interested in having is really important. And how do you know that except if you're listening to a conversation that's happening already in the world and participating in it?
Yeah, no, you wouldn't just walk up to a group of people at a party and start talking about whatever. You try and listen to what people are talking about, what's kind of going on, and try and get involved. So I sort of want to use that to, I guess, get into some more practical steps. So you've presumably sort of experienced this partly as an influencer on this topic and helping brands, but what do you think are the things that, if I'm a brand marketer, I want to reach out to influencers, what are the things you think I should be sort of asking influencers to do? Do you think it just depends on, as you said, like those skills I need, or are there a couple of things you'd always encourage brands to start with?
So one of the reasons I think the individual approach is important, I've had these conversations in the last few days, is that when you approach somebody as an organization, there's an expectation as an influencer that there's some kind of, if there's not a familiarity to start with, let me take a step back. Everything I do around social networking is around the concept of social capital, which is a very simple concept in a way, but we don't talk about it every day, which is we all know that when we have a relationship with somebody, we build up a certain amount of goodwill in our relationship because we do things for other people, because we help them, because we're giving before we're asking. And that idea of social capital is really important, I think, when you go into influencer marketing. If you have no social capital, if you're doing it as a tactic to get something from people, then it becomes very challenging. It's a different kind of calculus of what you have to do to get people's attention. And you might have had these conversations literally in the last few days where people say, when I'm approached by somebody who I don't know and they want me to write something for them, my question is, well, why would I do it for free? They think, the brand thinks they're giving you this opportunity to be seen as a thought leader, but someone would say, I'm already a thought leader. Why are you approaching me and expecting me to write for free? However, if somebody knows that influencer, has a personal relationship, has helped build them into the influencer they are, has shared their content, built their network with them, and then approaches them, there's a whole different kind of an approach. And so I've really, there's a different reception to that kind of sense of, we have social capital. I owe you something because you've helped me. So I think it's really important when you set out to do this, that you set out to, you understand the notion of social capital and that you build goodwill with the network before you ask for anything, that you have to build relationships. And again, that is better done, more efficiently done, through some kind of person who represents you rather than the brand approaching. Because the brand approaching looks very transactional.
Yeah.
And so people want, it becomes a transaction. Okay, well, you want this is what I want in return. And actually, to be totally frank with you, that's a game I'm really generally not interested myself in playing, because I think there's another way to do it that, in fact, in the long run is more effective, but in the short run is less transactional and less appealing to some people for sure, because they want something quick and they want a quick hit, they want results.
Yeah, I guess it comes back to the distinction we were talking about earlier between the PR person and the marketing person. The PR person might be, they might be more used to investing long term in this sort of group of external opinion formers. The marketers, it's kind of, how can I track back my return on investment on this specific campaign?
Right. Marketers think about campaigns and return and what they get. And PR people think more about brand and relationships and the longer term nature of that kind of return. And so you don't want to do anything really in the short term that damages the brand or damages that relationship in the longer term, such as asking for return too soon, right? Just what the market is. So that tension is there. And but I mean, we can talk about tactical things that you can do to build up that. There's lots of tactical things that you can do as a brand or as an individual that build social capital. And I think that's the objectives, to build social capital and then look at various ways of cashing or transferring your social capital value into something that you benefit, that you want.
Yeah, essentially you talk about there's tactics you can leverage, and I think we touched earlier on the fact everyone feels very busy. We kind of all everyone always feels like we're online more than ever. I've always got it in my pocket. I can do this all the time. What do you think are the sort of maybe the tactical things if you're one of those individuals who wants to start building that social capital on behalf of your brand? What do you think are the sort of really effective uses of like 10 minutes waiting on a train platform, or just while you're making a cup of coffee? Yeah. What are the kind of little things you think will really get you started?
Right. Look, that's a really good way to start, which is how can I do 10 minutes a day of something? So the first thing is, usually if you're paying attention to your industry, you have a sense of who's influential in your industry, right? And if you don't, do a little research initially to figure that out. There are lists. You guys produce lists. Yeah. There's lots of lists out there in the world. And it doesn't take that much to figure out these people are influential and are active. And so I want to pay attention to those people, because that's part of the way that you get audiences. You find someone with audience and you pay attention to them, engage them. So then, but in terms of day-to-day activities, it's literally as simple as pulling up your LinkedIn app and looking through your feed and actually liking some things and actually engaging, commenting, offer some value, share something that you think is insightful, because when you share it, you're giving something of value to the person who it came, through whom it came to you, right? So even if somebody else has shared it and you share it, but in the course of you sharing it, you mention that thanks to so-and-so for bringing this to my attention, or thanks to so-and-so for sharing this. My philosophy is every time you share anything, there's two payloads, if you will. There's the information value of the thing you're sharing, the information to somebody, and then there's this mention, this gratefulness to somebody that you express thanks for participating in this article. Thanks for bringing it to my attention. Thank you. I saw it on your feed. So there's always two things you want to do. You want to tap someone on the shoulder and say thank you, and you want to share something of value for your audience. And if you think about that every time, everything you share becomes this opportunity to pat somebody on the back. And the fact of the matter is, you want attention in social media, give attention to others. You want people to see you and to feel good about you and pay attention to you, then shine a light on somebody who, who's doing something every day that's valuable, sharing something valuable, writing something valuable. You do that consistently, 10 minutes a day for a year, 6 months, a year, people will start noticing you only because you're pushing attention to them. And that's the irony of the space, is when you say, me, look at what we're doing, look at our stuff. How can I pay you to look at our stuff? People aren't as interested. But when you say, look at what those folks are doing, they all of a sudden say, oh, that's interesting, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So it totally changes the equation, and that's a social media principle that I think is still not fully appreciated by the marketing transactional campaign mindset, that you get attention by giving attention.
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of putting it. I think it's interesting you're sort of talking about the sorts of things you share. Do you think that's maybe why people almost a little lower down in the organisation sometimes can make really, really great social advocates, is because they almost have those little stories from the shop floor? They're like, if you're a developer, it might be, we were trying to solve this kind of knotty problem on my team today, or if it's a sales leader, it's I was out with a customer today and this happened. Do you think that's kind of what makes them quite often really effective?
I think you're right that you're tapping on real knowledge that people have at the front lines of the organization. Sometimes there are sensitivities about how much of that you share. So, the organization you're working for has to have a culture, I think, of sharing and openness and transparency, and you have to be smart about how you navigate that. As an employee, or even as a leader. I mean, leaders typically, we expect them to be smarter that way. People that are working in the organization who don't have a public relations role are often expected not to talk. But but that's that employee advocacy thing is a whole extension, I think, of influencer engagement, because and it's it's an extension of what we're talking about, but it requires a whole level, I think, of infrastructure to make sure people are well trained, make sure people have clarity around the guidelines of the organization, which often they're not even clear. So how do people know how to stay on the right side?
You got to tell people what the rules are.
You got to tell people what the rules are. You got to be clear about what you want them to do and what you want them to avoid doing, and then you have to train them to that, right? So and that's I would advocate that for every organization everywhere, not just a few leaders, but you want people to be competent when they're out there talking, so you should train them to be competent.
Yeah, I guess it forms another part of the investment that you make. Obviously, you'll have your leaders, but it's valuable to have as many people kind of backing that up. In the public sphere. So I wanted to think about kind of this industry that's evolved around sort of advocacy and, as you call it, influencer engagement. If you were going to maybe point to one thing you'd like to change in this sphere, maybe something people are doing, a direction you see it going in, is there anything that you would is an area you'd really want to turn the ship around or change course?
Oh, turn the ship around. I think, we've talked a lot about this in this conversation. I think this tension between, in general, I've said, I think that people need to understand more that digital social networking is actually should be part of the day-to-day activities of any business leader in 2020. Like we're on the verge of 2020. We're about to enter a whole new decade where there's going to be a lot of transition, a lot of change. Digital technologies, social networks specifically, have been well established for at least a decade. And before that, right, going back, a better part of the last 20 years, there's been the emergence of social networks. And yet business leadership today, and I mean that in the broadest sense, not just C-suite leadership, business leaders are not uniformly expected to be sophisticated communicators and networkers as part of their jobs. And yet I can't even fathom why that isn't the case. I mean, partly because people hiring them don't appreciate it today. But I do believe that the digital skill set, digital networking, content sharing, learning how to engage. I mean, it's the same thing as, you would think twice before hiring somebody who's in a public facing role, who's challenged to have good relationships with people, if that's part of their job. And my feeling is that digital engagement is a kind of form of relationship making and building that a lot of people need help with. It's very learnable, but no one's holding them to the expectation that they should have it. So I think everybody's skills in the digital networking space need to be improved, especially among the leaders in our organizations, almost uniformly.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely final one, I promise. If people have enjoyed hearing from you as much as I have today, where can they find you?
I blog a fair bit at jpalter.ca. I'm based in Canada, work all over the world, and you can find me on Twitter at jpalter as well. So come and find me and continue the conversation.
And probably at conferences as well.
I do make it out to some conferences, but I have a limited number of conferences I can get to, so I do a lot of my relationship building online, which is
good. Practicing what you preach.
Yes, indeed.
Awesome. Well, Jay, thanks very much.
Thank you.